Pochettino's first U.S. men's national team camp is over, with 2 friendly matches played, a 2-0 win over Panama at home, and a 2-0 loss to Mexico away. I won't sugarcoat it, it was bad. But since these are friendly matches and the U.S. men's national team was missing Gio Reyna, McKennie, Pulisic, Tyler Adams, Johnny Cardoso, Serginho Dest, Tim Weah, and many others, it's not fair to call this a failure. But we can't also call it a success. I guess what we do from here is what will define it. So let's talk about it. Hi, if you're new here, I'm Filippo, and welcome to Tactical Manager TV, and welcome to our US men's national team camp recap. This is how it's gonna go. First, we're gonna go through 2 players that had their stocks go up, and then 2 players that had their stocks go down. After that, we're gonna go through 1 big positive and 1 big negative this camp. Last but not least, we're gonna rate the camp from 1 to 10, with 5 being average. And obviously, you can let me know in the comment section down below your stocks up, your stocks down, 1 big positive, 1 big negative, and what do you rate this camp, Pochettino's first camp, from 1 to 10, 5 being average. And obviously, as always, for our camp recaps, we bring a special guest, the same guest as always, Adam, USMNT Stan on X. Go follow him. Great account. I highly recommend it. You know what's crazy? We stayed up till what? 1 a.m., almost 1 a.m. on the East Coast. Everyone that's an East Coaster stayed up to close to 1 a.m. to watch the U.S. get spanked by Mexico. I am 99% certain that in the future, many years from now, maybe a century, maybe 2, sports fandom will be seen as a mental illness. Now I'm just yapping. Roll the intro and let's play the episode. Okay, everyone, as always, after a U.S. men's national team camp ends, me and Adam get together like Batman and Robin to do a camp recap, except for we're both Robin. We're both Robin.
Yeah.
But Adam, how you doing?
I'm good, man. I think we all hoped and wished it went a little bit better, but I can't complain. We're in a new era and there's promise. And it's a part of a process and journey that I'm willing to go on, and I don't feel like I've been in this journey for 5 years and we're turning the wheels. I feel like we're at the beginning of something, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, I like to look at it from a positive perspective as well. It was far from perfect, and we're going to talk about negatives as well. But at the same time, this is the beginning of the Pochettino era. It's going to be tough. Hopefully next month is better. What we want to see is progress every single camp. And just before we even start, these were the results of this camp. United States 2, Panama 0. We played in Austin, Texas. It wasn't a wonderful performance, but there was some progress from the Berhalter era, ball progression from central positions. We won, right, against Panama, a team that beat us in the Copa America. A few players stood out that didn't before, McKenzie, Busio. We're going to talk about that. And then we went to Mexico to play the second game with a team that was in an injury crisis, the United States, missing. We had pretty much like 1 or 2 starters only, like A-Rob and Turner, if you consider Turner a locked-in starter. But I would say just A-Rob is the only locked-in starter that was there. We lost 2-0. It was a pretty bad game in general because along with not playing well and our team not being that good, it seemed to lack some passion, some grit from the players, some fight in them. But anyhow, we lost to Mexico 2-0, and that leads us to this episode. Pochettino's first camp is over, and we want to talk about a lot of the things that happened this camp, and at the end, rate this camp and talk about if it was a success or a failure, which I think most people know. We're going to say it's kind of neither, right? We're not sure. But Adam, as we always do, we start with the players' stocks up. So let's go to positives, even though a lot of the stocks up sometimes are the players that weren't there. We want to give 2 players stocks up. And since you're the guest, I'll let you go first. Give me a player.
Sure, Mark McKenzie. I thought that he was pretty good. And, in this camp, that stands out. No, in all honesty, Mark McKenzie's had 2 straight showings where for our center back pool, at least he's been solid. And if you can put out a solid showing at the center back position right now, your stock is up. And for him, it definitely is, because I've been a big McKenzie doubter. If you followed my take on him at all, it's always been pretty skeptical and negative. But I'll give credit where credit's due. He's had 2 nice outings in a row, and I thought he looked mostly solid.
Yeah, I think he did a good job at times, dribbling into space, finding man in the midfield, doing the right pass, like progressing the ball as a center back, as a ball playing center back. I will tell you one thing: U.S. men's national team fans, or just sports fandom as a whole, people love to react to moments, right? Like little moments to nitpick. Like Musa dropped a stinker, but he scored a goal, so all of a sudden it was amazing, like, and it wasn't.
First goal, yeah.
Mackenzie overall was solid. I would say to me it was more of like average the camp for Mackenzie, roughly. But I agree his stock went up because Miles was horrendous. Tim Ream looked like he's declining. So just the fact that Mackenzie didn't look horrible, his stock went up. Richard wasn't available. Carter Vickers wasn't available. I agree with that. But speaking of moments, Farhado missed a goal for Panama when it was 1-0, which was on Mackenzie mostly. If that goes in, imagine the reactions. If we tie Panama and Mackenzie was the one that made a mistake, imagine that. That doesn't take away everything you said. You're right. But I'm just saying how people react to like one moment and it changes everything. And it doesn't matter that much, right?
100%. And it's like, sometimes people paint the whole picture based on the one stroke, right, of the brush. And unfortunately, as a center back, it's not all that unfair, right? Like if your mistake leads to the goal, it's kind of your job, right? Like giving up one goal is a big deal. Scoring one goal is a big deal as an attacker. And so I don't want to like say those don't matter, but like your point on Musa, and I'm sure we'll get there to him, is like a good one, which is like he wasn't good in either game. To me, it's like if the experiment was can Musa play wide, the conclusion was no, for me at least.
And he played central.
Right.
I'm not sure either, and I know.
I think we're going to have to try that out, though, right? Because, like, if he's going to play, it's going to be in one of those spots, and I don't think that one worked.
Yeah, and then so my stock's up. It's a bit of a weird one because I think his stock went down last camp, either with me or you. One of us said it, and it's Gio Reyna. I actually think his stock went up, and let me explain why before anyone attacks me here. Gio Reyna's stock has been declining. It's like the .com bubble all over again. It popped, the bubble popped, and it was just going down, man. It was just going down. But here's the thing, like, so he didn't go last camp because he was injured, and then when he got injured again, and he didn't make the roster for this camp, his stock went even lower. Even myself, we're like, we can't count on this guy, right? But after watching Brendan Aronson play the 10, after watching Tillman, a player that I still think is very talented, but once again not show up for the national team when given an opportunity, Gio Reyna's stock went up once again because it just became one of those where, okay, he's not always available. You can't count on him. But if he is available, you have to start him. What else are you going to do? Like, it just became that. I was hoping, not because I don't want Gio to do well, but I was hoping Tillman would shine this camp just to put pressure on Gio. Like, he's the new starter, Gio. Now you're going to have to come. But once again, it's just like if Gio's healthy, he has to start at the 10. No one came for it.
Agreed. And we're all of a sudden it like you can very clearly see where he fits in, right? If you're watching us play in possession, you're like, oh wow, we have a very clearly defined 2 guys in the half space, which we did earlier in the Berhalter tenure as well, but like very dual 10, right? There's no mistaking the fact that like Brendan Aronson, right, and Pulisic in game 1 were both in half spaces. Neither were wide and attacking and making runs in behind. They were in the half space, being asked to quarterback, being asked to connect and like play in zone 14. And I don't know, like I didn't see anyone, especially last game. Those guys were terrible at it. I mean, they were so bad. So it's like, I know Gio's competent at that. And if you can be competent at that right now, you're in. Like,
yeah, and Gio, to be fair, every time he's been injured quite a bit the past 2 years, and every time he came back from injury, he looked fine for us every time. Always looked very good, sometimes decisive for us. And yeah, you're right. The width was coming from A-Rob and Musa in possession, and then Pulisic and Aronson were tucked in, and then even the double 8s, right? Busio and Aiden Morris, and that's how we improve ball progression through central areas of the field. But again, also Pulisic needs a 10 to combine with. It wasn't working with Aronson. Tillman didn't play much with Pulisic. Also, Tillman for the national team, I don't know what happens to that guy. We'll talk about him soon. Adam, who's your second stocks up? Because so far we had Gio and Mark McKenzie.
Yeah, this one's going to be a little bit of a cop-out, but Jedi Robinson's stock is like skyrocketing because he just continues to be the only guy who's reliable on a team of a bunch of people, right, who are injured, hurt, inconsistent, like in and out. He just continues to be like a stalwart. It's almost like, it's hard to remember when Jedi really hasn't been available for an extended period, right? Like, and that is so awesome for us right now, right? I feel like he and Pulisic are going to be like the linchpins that this next 2 years are built on. And I'll knock on some wood there, but like both of those guys are always there. They seem to be always dependable, always reliable, putting in good shifts. And like, hopefully you need two to build around, and then you need to grow that to 4 or 5. Then you need to grow that to 7, 8, 9 guys that are reliable, dependable, high level options, right? And like right now, I saw 2 in this camp that were there who aren't hurt all the time and are just kind of always there, putting in decent shifts. Him and Pulisic. So Jedi, man, he's having a good year again, and all things are just kind of pointing up to him having like a really good run in his late 20s for us, which is awesome, which is really promising.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. The only reason I wouldn't put him as stocks up is just like, for me, I don't think his stock can go higher. It's just like his
stock rose because of how, to me, it's not necessarily that he played better than he's played. It's that everything around him is like crumbling for months straight, and the guy continues to be a stalwart. So in a land of like crumbling earth, that one little piece of land that's staying stationary becomes really valuable, right? The value goes up, as the ocean impedes, right? I'm going to hit too close to home for a Floridian. As the ocean impedes, right? Like if you got a nice piece of land that's not going to get, washed away, that's going to be worth a lot. So no, I agree. There's nothing that he did that was like, whoa, he's taking levels up in his game. More just dependability, man. Like we need more guys like him who can be dependable and reliable.
Yeah, and again, if he gets injured, the drop off to the backup is pretty freaking big, which makes him even more valuable and more crucial to be healthy. And thank goodness he has been.
It also just speaks to my opinion of everyone else. Tack, I can't wait to see who your number 2 is, because I was struggling to find anyone. Like,
yeah, so there's a few that we could make. Like, I'm gonna move on from A-Rob. I thought about including Busio, not because he was a standout, but just because he was among the less worst players in this camp. Just kind of looked like his stock went from a player that maybe a few months ago no one even thought about him being back at the national team, and then now I was like, okay, watching him, he can be a player 26 or 25 in a big roster. Like, but again, that doesn't really move the needle. That doesn't really matter too much, in my opinion, right now. Busio would have a lot of growing to do. So I'm actually, after thinking about it for quite some time, actually, which I should probably do other things with my life, but I was thinking about this a lot. I actually placed Balogun as stocks up because
you had 2 guys who didn't play. I love it.
Injured guys, injured.
I know. Guys who weren't even there and hurt. Yeah. Okay.
And I'll tell you what, because here's the fact of the matter. Sargent was playing well for Norwich, came into camp. I'm sorry, 2 stinkers. There's no defending that. I'm not saying banish him from the national team. I do think he will and should get more chances at some point. But again, he didn't convince us that he can't fight for that. I didn't think he could fight for the starting spot against Balogun, but now we are more than 100% certain if there was any doubt. The other player was Pepe. Now, Pepe came in against Panama, did a lot of defending, didn't really do much throughout the game, but he got one chance. He hit the target. It wasn't really a good finish. The goalkeeper jumped in a bizarre way, but he hit the target, and he scored. So he showed up. And then I was thinking, hey, maybe Pepe can go against Mexico, show up against Mexico, and then all of a sudden you're like, Balogun is still my guy, but hey, Pepe's starting to play a bit more for PSV. He's coming there. And then Pepe went into, like, I think a concussion protocol or something, right. Went back to PSV. Let's be real. He's still going to be on the bench for De Jong. It just seemed like he was going to catch that momentum, and he didn't really catch that momentum. Brendan Vasquez doesn't cut it for me. Actually looked better than Sargent, to be fair. But, I mean, I've watched a lot of Brendan Vasquez with Cincinnati, a few times with Monterrey, a national team. Doesn't convince me. So I just think, like, it just goes back to what we've been saying about Balogun. I don't know if his stock went up for many people, but it's just like, he is our best 9. He should start for us. It's not debatable. Pepe, Sargent, Vasquez, name it, whoever you want, is not close. Like, it's really not close. I still think Sargent, Pepe, these guys can be very useful. And again, you need different attackers. Balogun can be off one day, or we're just whipping in crosses. Pepe might be a better option. But like you start Balogun, even if he's not in good form. I mean, he does need that shoulder working. That's kind of important so he can run, but his stock just went up more than it was already. That's the player I could think of when I was going. I was gonna also name like maybe Dest because it does feel like we missed the guy quite a bit. But it's just that every time I thought about it, most of the stocks up were players that weren't there.
Right.
Which,
Well, dude, like, so the thing we're missing, right? I don't know how much, and maybe we'll touch on this more, so I won't go too deep, but like, we're missing guys who can combine and who are strong on the ball and who understand how to get on the half turn when it's appropriate, understand when to release the ball. Like, everything that's happening in the middle of the park, and even Jedi, as much as I like him and as much as he's reliable, he's not good at that stuff.
no.
Musa really isn't good at that stuff. That was proven. So, like, everybody wonders why we were bad against Mexico. And like, the narrative always right now goes to nobody showed up, nobody has heart, all these fan generalities, in all honesty. And I'm not saying I like totally disagree with all those, but like, I coached a lot of bad teams, Tack. Like, I coached some bad teams.
Let's name them.
That weren't,
I was gonna say let's name them.
That weren't good enough. Like, I had a bunch of teams where it's like, I didn't recruit well enough with this group, or we had injuries and transfers. And like, it was like, we don't have good enough players. And it always looks like our guys are kind of like not playing hard. Like, they just stink, man. Like, the group of guys we put out yesterday stinks. Like, I'm sorry, but like, and I get that some of those guys are playing well for clubs, but they're not good enough. Look at what they did against Mexico. Like, we're getting railroaded in the midfield. There was no creativity out wide. There was no ability to connect three meaningful passes other than passes along the back row, like, and it's just when you're playing like that, man, everybody looks bad. Everybody looks like they're not playing hard. Everybody looks like they didn't bring any harder fight. And I give a guy like Zendejas, I give Vasquez, I give those guys credit. They came in with heart off the bench. They brought a little bit more fight. And like, I like that. And I thought that was good. I'm not putting their stock up for it, by the way. Like, okay, like,
you're also already got 2 stocks up. You can't deliver anymore.
No, I can't find another stock up, man. We're going into the pool of injured guys to get 4 stock ups. Like,
yeah, and to your point there about like a bunch of mediocre players together, that just reinforces the point that Pulisic going back to Milan and resting was probably the best decision, because there was no point if the medical staff, Christian Pulisic, Milan, and U.S. soccer staff all came to the conclusion that this guy needs some rest. He's probably at a high risk of getting injured. We have a really important game coming up in November against Jamaica, which is a knockout round game of the Nations League. Like, the decision was right.
Dude, I get that people wanted to play against Mexico. Mexico is going to be like hunting his legs in this friendly. They're going to be going way too hard after him. It's Mexico, so he's not going to be able to contain himself, right? He would be going hard too. And it's all a recipe in a friendly for a guy who, like, has been playing his best soccer to go down there and get hurt for what, right? For no reason. Like, I hated the takes, all the takes.
It was Tim Howard, Alexi Lalas, and a few mainstream media guys. They're trying to,
right? Like all those guys.
Yeah, they're trying to start a narrative that Pochettino doesn't care enough. And Tim Howard, when it started, he already said that Pochettino needed to understand the American player, as if, like, what? No, sorry. It's not how it quite works. But again, it's just complete nonsense. The decision for Pulisic to go in a friendly, if it was a competitive game, I can assure you Pulisic would have stayed and played. But it was a friendly, and I don't know Christian Pulisic personally, but we do know him quite a bit as a player, right? I am pretty sure the decision was hard for him. He loves to play against Mexico. I don't think he wanted to leave like the ship or anything or abandon the ship. It was the right decision. We need Pulisic healthy. He's in good form for Milan. It's the big picture, right? This was a friendly. And also it gave the opportunity to other guys. We know what Pulisic can do. We don't have to see what Pulisic can do. If it's a friendly to test, we know what Pulisic can do. And we were already missing many guys. So putting Pulisic out there with a bunch of mediocre players with a very physical Mexican side in Mexico would have been moronic. So good call for Pochettino, good call from Christian Pulisic, Milan, everyone involved.
Spot on. Mexico, and I want to wrap up my thought, which I didn't do, which is like, all these guys are average players. They can't combine, can't connect. You mentioned Dest. You mentioned Gio. You mentioned all these guys have stock ups.
McKinney can too.
McKinney, Johnny, right? All these guys we were missing who actually are good on the ball, good at, have great vision, can combine well, build up well. Like, we're just missing all of the pieces of our puzzle that do that well. And so the stock up is like our A team, their stock is way up because it's like we need all, and like, I don't know, it's a weird thing to say, but like all those dudes stock up because you just saw the difference. There's a big gap right now, man. There's a big gap between our first 12, 13 and the next 12 and 13.
Which I think it's normal. Outside of maybe the top 5 to 8 national teams in the world, everyone would struggle missing all those players. But now let's go to the easy part of the video. The stocks down. Like we're gonna just give. I'm gonna give 2. You're gonna give 2. There's definitely more than 4. So anyone watching the video right now, let us know who are your stocks down and why. And if you're in the comment section of the video, you can actually put as many as you want. There are no rules. We're making up the rules here. Otherwise, me and Adam will talk for 5 hours. So Adam, do you want to go first or you want me to go first?
Sure. I'm gonna steal 2 good ones though, and I'm gonna combine them and cheat. The Tillman and Aronson dual 10 against Mexico. Right? Both of those guys stock down, right? As soon as we get into a game where there's a little bit of pressure, a team's playing hard, a team's coming after us, it's on the road. And this is why we wanted Berhalter to take our team on the road more, because you get to actually see how guys respond under adversity, which if you're going to try and win a World Cup quarterfinal match, if that's the end game, like let's get to that level and try and win a knockout round match, it's going to be adverse. It's not going to be easy. So I liked that we were in Mexico. I liked that we got to test it out. I think Poch learned a lot, and I think something he learned, stock down, Tillman and Aronson are not ready for those moments. Maybe they can be guys that are super subs, come off the bench and play a role, but man, they didn't look very close right now for a game like that.
And can I add one thing to those 2 guys before I tell you my 2? It's not just this game, right? Like, it's not just this window. Like Aronson and Tillman, it was more of a confirmation for the national team. I mean, Aronson in general, it's like the player profile in general. But Tillman looks like a different player for PSV. He does have those like sleepy moments for PSV where he looks too casual, but he has been decisive for PSV.
Yeah, you say it all the time. Who does he look good against for PSV mostly?
Go ahead, Eagles.
Like, of course he looks good for the most talented team in that league against the bottom 10. Yeah, he looks good. He has all the time in the world on the ball. Right. I'm not saying Netherlands is MLS, but it's a similar thing, right? Like when you start playing lower level teams, it's the same thing with like CCV, right? He's not growing because he's like playing for Celtic against bad teams. He's not being tested. And like Tillman, I just take it all with a grain of salt, man. I think we have to start to take Sargent's championship goals, Tillman's performances in the Netherlands. That is grain of salt. Are they good players? Can it translate? Yes. Is it translating yet? Definitely not. And we have a decent amount of data with Aronson and Tillman, to your point. And I still have one more. That's a combined one. Sorry. Yeah. I'm just combining them into like a mold of 2 dual.
To screw me over, to give me less up. Don't worry, you're not going to screw me over because there's a lot of
I know. My next one might have 2. I might combine.
Yeah, I could do like 6 or 7 here. But so just to your point, yes, Tillman, Aronson is Aronson. We've talked about him extensively. It's like lots of fight, lots of hustle, and literally it ends right there. That's it. Tillman, yeah, he should go to the Bundesliga, play for a mid-table team, get challenged. We need to question certain leagues like the EFL Championship, Eredivisie, similar to how we question when there are players that are successful in MLS. They're successful in MLS. It doesn't really translate to the national team. In those leagues, I do think they're a little bit ahead of MLS, but if it is, it's not that much, clearly, because the players are standing out there, and when they come to the national team, they've been struggling. Different from players like in the Prem and the Serie A. Moose has been struggling to Serie A, just to make that clear. He's been
time to give somebody else a run at those spots, though, Tack. Like, I hope Poch is looking at it going, let's bring in somebody else. Who else do we got? Because it's just that isn't working. Like, those guys didn't look good against Mexico, who's not very good, and Panama. Like, neither of those guys look very good in those games. Like,
to me, my first stock down is Yunus Musa. I don't get caught up in one moment, and he scored a goal. Good for him. First U.S. men's national team goal. But he can't really play in Pochettino's midfield because he can't pass. Pochettino clearly wants passers. He wants to progress the ball through the midfield, through central positions, and Musa can only do that if he dribbles into space or dribbles into like 5 players and loses the ball. And even when he does that, after he does that, he doesn't freaking know what to do with the ball every time. Eventually, he tries like a long shot and almost scores bangers. There's things like that. And then Pochettino put him out wide, clearly seeing that, hey, maybe he's got that pace, dribbling ability. Maybe I can use him as a winger. And honestly, he was quite poor. He wasn't tracking back, wasn't offering jack crap going forward. And even the goal he scored, I'm sorry, it's a tap in. Usually the way I evaluate, good off the ball movement from him and competent finish. But dude, imagine if he misses that. We would be bashing the living crap out of him. Jesus Ferreira has missed goals that were tougher than that, and people kept complaining about it. Rightfully so. I was one of them. But he had to score that. He didn't have an option. He had to score that. Regardless, good for him. But his stock has to go down because Musa a while back was a guy that you're like, he's starting for us. He has to start. We have to find a place for him. Now in the midfield, I don't see much space for him if everyone's healthy, right? You look at the 10. He can't play the 10. So that's going to have to be like Gio Reyna. I even talked to Pete about if Tillman keeps playing like this, I'll put McKennie at the 10 because McKennie at least is a goal-scoring threat. He's a goal-scoring threat, and he can pick a pass when he wants to. He can do that, McKennie. I was looking at
100%. Like if we don't have Gio, right? And you're like, who's going to play the same role Aronson just played for 2 straight games, right? Who's going to play that role? McKennie. I totally agree.
More technical than Aronson, better in the air, can score, can actually pick a pass, can cross if he drifts wide. I would go with McKennie. Can combine in tight spaces. And then the double pivot, I even talked to this with Pete. I would actually like to see like McKennie or Gio at the 10, and then Johnny and Tyler, because then it just gives so much freedom to the 10, right? Johnny and Tyler there would be an option. I'm going to say one thing too. I think Busio looks better than Musa in the midfield too. Can actually pass. Like with all his flaws, he can actually pass. So Musa's stock is down. Like I don't think it's very much debatable. And I'm not going to let a goal change what I think about the player when it comes to the big picture. Do you want me, since you cheated, do you want me to give you my other one, or do you want to go so I don't ruin?
I have another one, and it's 2 again. I'm cheating again.
Go.
Okay, last camp, we played pretty low-level competition. I think people came out of that like, Aiden Morris, okay. Right? I think we played Panama at home.
Wait, hold on. We played low-level competition, but we didn't win a single game last camp.
No, fine. But but though, like performing against those teams as a player to me is like good, but it's baseline stuff. We always say this, right? Yeah. You should perform against lower level teams. Panama at home, if you're a decent player, you should look pretty good against. I thought Busio and Morris looked pretty good against Panama at home. The big question I have about both those guys is, are they ready for prime time? Right? Which to me, that's the thing about stock is like your stock goes up because I believe you're ready for prime time. And to me, I totally disagree. I don't totally disagree with the Busio stuff. He did look competent in the Panama game. He was getting railroaded in the Mexico game. Both of those guys, I mean, the midfield was a joke. They were the anchors of our midfield, and they were getting run over. I mean, it was like a totally non-competitive. Both of those guys. They didn't have any movement off the ball to get free. When they did get on ball, they looked terrible. They're terrible giveaways. And then they both just like, if you thought that was a thing, that's not a thing. Neither of those guys are in the top 5 options, 6 options at that position for us. And they need to be, I mean, that's like a D dual pivot, a D team dual pivot or D option dual pivot.
So for example, but let's talk about Busio here for a second. Yes, look competent against Panama. In the Olympics, he looked like, I would say like probably top 2 or our best player until he pulled a hammy or something. And then in the Serie A, he's looked competent at least to start the season. Do you think he doesn't deserve more shots, maybe? Busio specifically?
I'm just not a Busio believer, to be honest, but I think there's some fundamental flaws in him. I think he's Johnny without any of the physicality that Johnny has and any of the defensive ability that Johnny has. He's like a way worse version of Johnny. And I mean, maybe he can grow into some of that stuff, but if he's going to be playing in that spot, you can't go up against that Mexico midfield and look atrocious. You just can't. Like, that's inexcusable. Like, I don't know. It was so uncompetitive yesterday, Tack. Like, so uncompetitive.
So, Busio, we're going to have to find that out. I still think not a starter. Nowhere close to that. He can't compete. Like, if he's starting for us in the World Cup, we're in trouble. I still think he can be like a 25, 26 men in the roster. I'm not really sold on Aiden Morris. That's a player that, even in MLS, dude, for the Columbus Crew, ever since he came back from that ACL injury, I didn't think he was quite the same player. Looks fine in MLS. Looks like he's doing okay in the EFL Championship. But as we said earlier in the video, that league, take it with a grain of salt, right? Aronson's doing all right there too.
You're questioning if Yunus Musa can play over Busio. I've seen Yunus Musa play in the midfield and own Mexico's midfield. I've literally watched it multiple times, right? Like
at home, yeah.
Maybe he's in bad form, but I've seen that.
But at home, with
I am yet to see Gianluca Busio play for the United States national team in a game that isn't a cupcake and look competent. But he just always looks so unphysical as soon as the game dials up. So I don't know. I mean, maybe
Musa, but again, Musa's performance dominating Mexico was at home with all of our best players with him. So that drags attention, and we were bullying Mexico, right? So yeah, I'm still very
would Musa look better in that spot? I don't know, probably not. I'm certainly
Musa looked horrendous against Mexico, even out wide. Like it didn't matter. He was losing the ball left and right.
Be playing out wide. I mean, the things he was being asked to do. I mean, I hope that question was answered for Poch. I really do. I mean, but I see what Poch is doing. It's like, okay, if we have everybody healthy, where does this guy fit? Maybe it's here. Let's try it. Right? I get it. I don't think it was like an illogical thing to try.
The thing is,
I think your questions, if everybody's healthy about Musa's spot, are very legit. Like, where does this guy squeeze in? You know, I think all that's legit.
Yeah, even Fonseca, the Milan manager, he doesn't want to play Musa in the midfield anymore, right? He said it blatantly. He can't really be the backup to Fofana. He's a ball carrier, but it just doesn't work. That's why Milan is trying to get another midfielder now. So we'll see. But my stock down, I said one of them, right? I already said Musa, and then you gave your stock down was Busio and Morris.
The whole midfield from that Mexico game, my stock's way down for all.
So Busio and Morris was your second one,
right? It was the dual 10s and the dual pivot. That's all my stock down. Like I'm way down on all those guys after yesterday.
To me, another stock down was actually Sargent, mainly because, like we talked about, like you're playing well for your club. That gives you the opportunity to show for the national team that you can contribute. And he got 2 starts. Like he got 2 games. And sure, like people are going to say he didn't get service. Like, yeah, but again, the problem is the 2 center forwards, and I understand that the 2 center forwards that came on, they came against tired legs, but they looked better than Sargent. Like Vasquez looked better than Sargent. Pepe scored. So I'm sorry, like I can't defend him. I'm not saying banish from the national team, but you have to put his stocks down. He got 2 starts and he didn't deliver anything. It wasn't just missing that opportunity against Panama. He wasn't combining. He wasn't doing much. You have to also, like, sure, you're not getting service, but you do also have to try to show up for the game. Like, right, Brendan Vasquez, with all his flaws, he came in and tried and was getting the ball, got a shot on target, 1 headers. I didn't see that with Sargent. So his stock has to go down.
At some point, you got to perform. And, like, I get it. I sympathize a little bit with, like, how do you play as a 9 in that Mexico game? You know, there's literally nothing going on behind you. And maybe it's unfortunate. Maybe it's unfair. But at the end of the day, it kind of is what it is, man. And, like, you got 2 chances. You didn't take advantage of either of them. And I don't know if you should just be trotted out there to get another 90. You know, like, you might have to wait your turn to get another chance.
And might need an injury crisis.
Scoring in bunches in the championship. I've said this for years now. That's nice, but it does not mean anything. Do you know how many guys who have been top 5 scorers in the championship never amount to anything in higher level leagues? Like go look at the list of and there are some that amount to be amazing, but like it's just not an absolute indicator, right? Like it doesn't mean it's going to translate up. And I think that's what everybody needs to wrap their head around is it's cool and it's good and it's better than not scoring, but it does not mean he's a locked in scorer because he's on fire in the championship.
Okay, and that does my stock down. We have yours. So yours was essentially the midfield, Tillman Aronson, and then Busio and Morris. Mine were Musa and Sargent. And again, guys, there are more players. We obviously have to cut it at some point. Otherwise, we just keep going. Now let's go to the next section, which is one big positive from camp. It can be a player. It can be the big picture. It can be the win against Panama. Whatever you want. What's the big positive for you?
My big positive is that I think that you can see that Poch has very clear ideas tactically. I thought he was able to. You saw in Panama him able to like implement the structure very quickly, and I think that organized structure allowed us to beat a Panama team that frankly, like we've been struggling against that level of team for about a year. And we mostly owned that game. You know, to your point, there was a missed chance here. We mostly owned that game. We didn't dominate it, but like you play that game 5 times, we win 4 times. And that's good progress. And the organization and the structure is really good. Now, the next level is like, can we insert our best players? And then can you get the nuance of it is like, can you understand how to play off each other within the structure that he's setting up, right? And break the structure at times, right? And interchange players. And all that's the complexity that comes with more than 5 days of training, you know? And so I just want to keep everybody's, you know, expectations, you know, flat and straight, which is like, he's going to need 3, 4, 5 camps, and he's going to need to get the best players in there to see, you know, real upward trajectory within the system that he's growing. But I like it. I think there's some flexibility to bring Dest out to a wing back. Jedi can go out to a wing back. Right. I'm interested to see if he ever goes 3 center backs. I hope he doesn't. I kind of like the idea of like the stay-at-home left back. I think those guys are good. I think those guys can still do some things with their speed out wide at times. I like the dual 10s for us. I think Pulisic fits into that role on either side. I think Gio can fit into that role really nicely. I think McKennie can fit into that role. And then I think those guys can combine with somebody like, it gives Ballo a chance, I think, to make runs, right? If you imagine the idea is to get the ball to the feet of the 10s, right around zone 14, and then have somebody like Ballo who's elite making runs behind the defense. I think that's a really good strategy and a really, really sound idea tactically. And now we'll see if he can implement it.
Yeah, the back 3, we only saw it in possession, right? That was the only thing. It was like a right back thing.
Exactly.
Yeah,
right.
it was like
here's the thing I really like about that tack is like, I think that we're, especially when we get called on to possess, we're going to give it up. That's just our personnel. And when we do, having 3 guys back, it just creates more of a compact experience when you're trying to transition against us, right? You have 2 dual pivots who are also pretty close to that back line and can get back quickly. And you have 3 guys in the back as opposed to 2, and center back's one of our weakest spots. So I thought against Panama, we had a crowd around the ball most of the time when they got in those transition moments. And we gave them some transition moments and we gave the ball away. But I liked the crowd around it. And I thought that actually caused some problems for Panama. And I thought if we just had 2 guys back there, Ream and McKenzie, we could have gotten more trouble. So I don't know. There's some things structurally I like. And now we'll see if he can, you know, make it work.
Yeah. And to your point of all of that, it was refreshing to see something different, some different ideas. But I'll say this, one big positive to me was not a lot, pretty much almost all the starters weren't available. So a big positive was it tested a lot of players. A lot of them failed. It exposed a few players. And I think that's important because now Pochettino knows who he can count on or not. I mean, at least I hope he does. And that would be my big positive. It exposed the players that can be useful or not.
Yeah.
But now, one thing I wanted to go through with you real quick, not real quick, like, I don't know if you have anything else to say about the positive, because I want to go to the negative.
I don't, you know, I think that I'm not going to say it about the positive. Here's my one thing that kind of fits into what you said, though, right? Which is like this camp at the end of the day for Poch, like publicly, I think he did a good job of saying, we're here to compete. We're here to win. But I think behind it, there's secondary reasons that coaches have for doing things, right? And I think he put his structure in and said, okay, this is the structure I want to play with when our A guys are back. I want to see how this group of guys can fit into this and who we like here, right? And I think potentially, I don't know this is a fact, but I think potentially the coaching staff learned a lot about what our second/third unit is going to do for them, you know, and probably have a lot of information. Some guys they're probably crossing off. Some guys they're going up. We got to bring in somebody over him. And honestly, they might have even learned some stuff that we didn't see in training, et cetera, of like, I like that guy. When we put that guy around, you know, Pulisic and Ballo, et cetera, they're going to be way better. So some good learnings.
Yeah. And the reason I held on to that positive and I want to go right to the negative is because my negative is connected to my positive. I said not having those players expose who can or cannot play. And I think this camp, one negative is that our depth was tested, and I think it failed. I think it failed. Like you mentioned it many times in the video. There was a clear lack of quality, right? Clear lack of quality with our bench. Like not our bench. Yeah, essentially, I could call it our bench, right? Most of those players are backups. And it failed. Our depth was tested, and it failed. And that's not good because when you get to the World Cup, we could be missing a few players. We could be. Like, players can get injured. Knock on wood. Like, imagine Christian Pulisic's injured, right? It seems like we can't score a goal without Christian Pulisic these days. So that to me was a big negative. I was hoping that our backups could pull a result against Mexico, and then we say, see, there's some depth there. There are options. We can compete even when we're missing our star players. That didn't happen.
Tack, my big negative. Do you hear that? You hear that ticking clock? That's the ticking clock of 10 camps or 11 camps or whatever it is until World Cup 26, right? My big negative is we just went through an entire camp and tick, tick, tick. We had a lot of guys who, you said it earlier, if this is the group we're rolling out, we're screwed. And I agree. So we just had a whole camp and we're missing so many key guys. And I get there's nothing Poch can do. There's nothing anybody can do, but it's a big negative, man. Like we need, and it doesn't look like by November we're going to have a number of those guys back for November either. And every camp that goes by where we don't have our group together is a big missed opportunity at this point in time, because we got a new coach and a small timeline to get this team ready for the World Cup. And so it's a big negative. And like my one addition to yours, which I think yours was also I was kind of thinking about, is like, the big question was like, which of those guys are ready for prime time? And when I say ready for prime time, like, can you be the guy, right? Like, and that would have been a big moment, right? If Tillman shows, man, Tillman owned the midfield. He was just like so active, creating all over the place, solid on the ball. Like, we would have come out of that game being like, you said it to start the video, like, okay, Malik Tillman, a dude, like ready to insert into the A team and potentially be able to carry us for stretches. And like, I don't know, you had all these guys, Sargent at the 9, him, Aronson with another opportunity, Busio Morris, and to me, it was a big, massive fail that like, no, all those guys, you got to figure out who can be role players. Who can you insert around our best players, and maybe they're competent enough to like hold the line, because none of them are ready to like carry the day, right? And that may seem crazy, but man, those are pretty good players in there. Those are good, young, talented players who we've all been hoping are going to grow into being lead dogs. None of them are lead dogs yet, though.
It's interesting because I pulled the lineup there because you were mentioning who is ready for prime time, and I'm looking at the lineup outside of A-Rob. I don't think any of them.
No, I mean, none of them are ready to be leaned on. Can you put Scally in and can he play, do a job? Like, yes, but you're not feeling great about it. You're like, ooh, when's Des coming back? Right? That's how I feel about all those guys. If we're inserting any of those guys right now, I'm like, ooh, how many minutes?
And it's interesting because even looking at the lineup now, when we were talking about the stocks down, if I had given you one more, since you were pairing up players, you'd probably pair up Miles and Reem.
Yeah. Just keep going straight down the spine.
All of them.
And then I'm like, I don't know. Yeah.
Because Miles was abysmal, and he has to be done at the national team at this point. It's not just because of this game. Like, we've talked about Miles a long time ago, and it just exposed him more. And Tim Ream, I'm okay with him being like the 4th center back in the roster. We just can't keep starting him. We have to find a new duel. He can be there for experience, and maybe if you put him late in the game, he won't get exposed. But there's been a clear decline with Tim Ream at this point, and it's not going to get better by the World Cup. He has moved back to MLS. The guy's not getting any younger. Father Time is undefeated. And again, Tim Ream is another one. It's unfortunate because he's one of my favorite players here in this overall roster for what he's done for the national team. Adam, last but not least, we rate the camp. And this is a tricky one, right? Because you can go based on results. I don't think results matter too much this camp because it's a friendly camp, in my opinion, right? You can use results if you want to. And I had this analogy on Pete's stream and in my 7 Things We Learned, where it kind of reminds me of Star Wars The Force Awakens, where it was a good setup episode, but it relied on what came after to be considered a good movie. And what came after was shit. So Force Awakens is seen as a shit movie these days. But if episode 8 and 9 were good, everyone say, oh, that movie was great. It was a great setup. So right now, it's hard to rate this camp because it depends on what comes after. Did Pochettino learn? Is there a lot of data that he'll use and we'll see progress in the future? Is he going to cut some players that just can't make it? That's why it's so tricky to rate this camp. And for that reason, I'm handing you this hot potato because I want to see your rating first.
First of all, Kathleen Kennedy, who's the head of the Lucas division at Disney, she created a movie, right? She created a trilogy without a story for the trilogy. So it is like coaching and being like, let's let's go with the 4-3-3. And it's like, well, long term, what's the plan here? I don't really know, but we'll go 4-3-3 today. And so start like you can't create a trilogy without knowing where it's going. And that's a lot like, it's a lot like coaching here. I don't know if I it's so hard, man. So I would say this: if the perspective is okay, the goal was to learn about all of our second unit guys and really glean insight into who's ready, as I've been saying, ready for prime time, who's not, who do we want to be a role guy, who's not even good enough for that. It was probably a massive success. It was probably a 9 out of 10 camp if that was the goal. If the goal was, a combination of that and results, it was a 6 out of 10. We beat Panama. We haven't been beating Panama. We lost to Mexico or on the road. We always lose to Mexico on the road. So kind of a blah results wise. And then if the goal is results, purely results driven and like performance driven, it's probably a 3 out of 10. Pretty poor performances if you combine them both.
Yeah, it's very tricky to rate it. I'm gonna say it's a 5 this camp average, and over time this rating could go up if we see progress and all that. But it's just that we don't have the data. The performances itself were not good. Even the Panama game, there was some progress. You talked about the structure of the team and a few things, but again, it wasn't great. And then Panama, and then Mexico, it was horrendous. I'm gonna give it a 5. I am optimistic about the future. Pochettino clearly didn't look happy. I think he learned a lot. I think we're gonna see a lot of progress. But I mean, we gotta call a spade, and this camp wasn't great. Like, it wasn't a good camp. It wasn't a good camp. A little expected considering the players we were missing and Pochettino still getting to know the player pool, right? He can study the player pool all he wants. You only really learn when you're with them, seeing there day to day, training, putting them to play. He can go watch games, watch tape, get advanced analytics. It's different when you're with the guys. And he's learning about these players. It takes time. And please, like we talked about this before, we were missing Weah, Balogun, Pulisic, McKennie, Adams, Johnny, Dess, Richards, Carter Vickers, and even backups, like a De La Torre. He's probably better than like maybe Busio, maybe better than Aiden Moore. It's like so many players that we were missing that you can't really like. I know mainstream media is trying to already start to push a narrative on Pochettino. Doesn't care like this and that. Alex even implied that he got lucky because if he lost, he gets a pass. It's like, honestly, even if we had our best players and he lost because it was the first camp, we're going to cut him some slack. It's the first camp, right? Berhalter lost to Mexico twice the first 2 times he played. He at home in the Gold Cup final and then 3-0 in a friendly. So we need to give him time. If Pochettino was in charge for 12 months, I'm sure we would be far more critical. It's like, guys, we can't be playing like this tall. It's the first camp. We're going to be patient. I am still very optimistic about it. And I'm going to give it a 5 for this camp, but my optimism is still sky high.
And P, I want to speak to the people out there who I think there's a lot of like, oh, I've seen it directed toward you. It's been directed toward me a little bit. Like, oh, you guys are so inconsistent. And it's like, what are you talking about, man? Like, can you find my tweets from Berhalter's first camp? If you can, then show me I'm inconsistent. But Berhalter's first camp, I was like, new coach. We'll see. And like, you have not only do you have to give him time, like I can guarantee you, if next year in the October camp, those are the performances, even with the second unit tack, you and Pete are going to be roasting him post game. We are going to step on here and be like, this is not going well. Like, we need to think about whether or not this is the right move for next summer. Like, if we have these kind of performances a year in, that's what we were getting with Berhalter 5 years in, guys. Like, it's not like crazy that we were calling for Berhalter's job or questioning whether or not we're insane. Like, this is camp 1, right? If we see this kind of BS a year from now, stuff is really wrong, right? So step by step, I mean, I'm going to be a pretty harsh judge here. Like, I expect Poch to be able to turn this around pretty quickly. Like, I expect by March to see us performing at a different level, and I expect by the summer to see us performing at a different level. And if we're not, I will be critical.
Adam, he's also from Argentina. I would love to hate him.
Yeah,
I would love to hate him. I just like, if he wants to give me reasons to hate him, I'll do all the hating possible. But no, I want him to be successful. I want this era to go as well as it can go. But everyone, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to follow Adam on X, right? His handle will be in the description, but it's also under his head. So that might be easier for y'all to see. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to drop a like. And obviously, after every camp, we're here to recap it. Lots of fun. Adam, thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.